So round about the age of perhaps 13, I started to realize I could do things that other people didn't seem to be doing, such as seeing people who weren't there.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome back to another episode, everybody. I'm so glad that you've returned, and you're so glad that we've got new listeners, and so glad that you're listening to this episode. Today, I am so excited to invite our new guest, Ann Theato, from the UK, and I just can't wait to dive in and ask her all kinds of questions. So, Ann, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. It's been such a long time waiting to reconnect with you, so glad having you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. It's really lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things I always love to find out, you're an outstanding medium. You've been practicing mediumship for such a long time. One of the things that always fascinates me is, how did you get here from there? Because some people start out, they're born as a medium, or they're born connecting. Others, if there's a situation or some kind of awakening. How did your journey begin?
Thank you for that question.
It's a tough one.
Well, it's interesting, Chris, because I always thought you had to be born with a gift. Well, we are born with a gift, but everybody is. But I thought you had to have something extraordinary happen to you in your lifetime in order to become a medium. And that's your breakthrough moment. And therefore, you're going to follow this path. Well, that's not what happened for me. I have had to study this quite hard and attend a lot of courses and come to my own understanding of what mediumship is. So it's taken an awful lot of hard work, physically attending courses, reading an extraordinarily large amount of books, and doing an enormous amount of self-reflection in order to put aside the natural skeptic within me and truly accept this is a true 100 million% thing that we can, as human beings, use our consciousness to talk to the consciousnesses of those in the spirit world.
I think that's so well said, because there is this myth that, you've got to have the talent, you've got to be naturally born, or you have to have some kind of special ability. But I love the way you put it, that you had to not only study so hard and practice so much, but also put aside the self-doubt and learn to put aside all the skepticism that we naturally have, to realize, oh, I can do this. Because everybody starts out with that skepticism. No, I can't do this. This is not possible. It's not in our normal world.
No, it's sadly, it's not. And the world is skewed. Well, the Western world, perhaps, is skewed in their opinion and their beliefs about the possibility of mediumship and psychic ability. And so I've had to relearn the truth for me. And I'm sure lots of people out there have done the same.
So you went to the Arthur Findlay College, is that right?
Yeah, so I knew I was psychic as a child, Chris. So round about the age of perhaps 13, I started to realize I could do things that other people didn't seem to be doing, such as seeing people who weren't there, or being able to predict things. I would know exactly who I was going to meet on the way to school, even if it wasn't their usual route. I just had this inner knowing I would meet this person. I could predict football scores and things like this, but just by using the psychic mind. And people would say, what's the score going to be? And I said, this and this. And I didn't understand because it's easy peasy. Boom. So then I got some tarot cards when I was 17 and I learned how to read those. And then in my 20s, I started mixing with more like-minded people. And then in my 30s, I went off to study at places like the Arthur Finney College. Tony Stockwell has his own school, and I went there first. And then I went over to the Arthur Finney College and studied all kinds of different topics with all kinds of different tutors. So, yeah. And then I started to study with the Spiritualist National Union and through their education program. So, and that was incredibly helpful for me to learn the process and the practice and the ethics and how to behave as a medium.
That's a great point. The ethics of mediumship. Talk about how important the ethics are, as well as we are responsible for couching the information that comes through so as we're not doing any harm. We're not hurting. We're not, showing graphic things to reintroduce pain. Talk about that.
Yeah, don't know where to start really, Chris.
It's a big topic.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge topic. I mean, with mediumship, the way that we are currently using mediumship at the moment, well, how we're currently using mediumship is we're bringing messages through. That's how we use it. We don't so much use it for art or drawing, although there are, of course, many, many fantastically talented spirit artists. But that's another way mediumship can be used. We can use it through channeling. We can use our mediumship through inspired speaking. We can use our mediumship with science, with maths, with anything. Just use the hive mind of the collective unconscious out there and use that. That's your mediumship, and use that to help you through your human life. So I think I'm going slightly off topic here, but the way that we're using mediumship at the moment is on our one-to-one readings, and we're reading for people who are grieving. That seems to be generally the way that we use it. And you have to treat people who are grieving with the greatest care and the greatest love and the greatest compassion and respect. And you have to be very careful in the way that you put things to them. You don't want them, as you've just said, to relive that pain or to relive the experiences. They have been through those experiences of their loved one passing away before. They don't want to have to do it again. They want to hear from them now. What do they see of your life now? What are they doing in the spirit world? So there's that. We have to be very, very careful of the way that we put information and not bully people. I've seen mediums who are quite, you must take this, do you understand? And we don't want to be bullied as a recipient or a client. Yes. I mean, what other ways can we discuss ethics? Because it is a huge topic.
Yeah, I guess it's within the, very, very similar to the medical community in do no harm. Whatever you're doing with your client, just do no harm. And that seems to be the underlying principle, because as you're doing no harm, you're also bringing through the love of spirit. If you're bringing through the love of spirit and you're focusing on, the ethics of do no harm, then you're bringing through the true love and the true nature of spirit. Because, there are mediums out there who are either grasping at straws, or they're perhaps being a little bit too graphic with the information that they're receiving. And it's just not bringing through exactly what spirit would want, not what the client would want.
No,
that's I guess kind of where I was thinking just about the ethics of it. It's so important because it is a very delicate balance, I guess.
And you have to be careful with the words that you use as well to describe that which you're saying. I did a demonstration last night, and I brought through a gentleman, and I knew immediately that he had taken his own life. But I didn't say that, and I didn't use that phrase to explain it. I explained about his personality. I discussed who he was in the world, the business that he had, the things that he enjoyed. And I was working with his wife, actually. And it was only sort of halfway through the reading I said, very gently, I know that your husband was responsible for his own passing. And she said, yes. And I said, I know I don't need to say anything else about that to you. And I moved on and talked about other things. So it was just a little acknowledgement that he gave that to me. But you don't have to harp on and on and on.
Right, exactly. I mean, all you have to do is to really give a high level concept of what they're trying to get across. The sitter will know in a second. You don't have to go through the nitty gritty detail of exactly what they did and exactly how they were found, because that's just going to, make the person relive everything and all over again. You don't need to go through that.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think with ethics, Chris, I think we have to be careful. We have to know the difference between our psychic mind and the mediumship.
Yes.
That is being communicated through the person in the spirit world. Because if I was to say to that lady, I'm picking, pick something random. I'm picking up that you have chickens in the back garden. She might think that's come from her husband, but it's not. I'm picking that up psychically. And it's not fair for her to think her husband said something about something when he hasn't at all. So morally and ethically as a medium, you have to say, I just want to say to you, this is me now. This is not your husband, but I feel like I have to acknowledge the chickens in the backyard. They're important to you because of whatever it is I'm psychically feeling, and just get that out of the way. Right, back to your husband. What he's now saying is. So you're making a big difference between the two and not passing it off as spirit communication when it is absolutely not.
Exactly. That's a great point, because there's so many times people will lose their, mediums will lose their power, lose their energy, and start connecting psychically, and the information they're flowing through is more directed about the sitter as opposed to about the communicator.
Yes.
If the information's coming from the communicator, you can then say your loved one is letting me know X, Y, Z, as opposed to I know this about you.
Yes.
And I think a lot of mediums sometimes get that jumbled, or trying to get the information and they just throw it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, when we're beginning our mediumship, we can't really tell the difference between psychic and what's coming from the spirit world. It's kind of difficult to make that differentiation, I think. So,
yeah.
And that's okay when you're first beginning. We have to begin somewhere, and we have to work with what pops into our consciousness and offer that over. But as we develop in our training and we better ourselves as mediums, that's when you can begin to really know the difference. And
Well, that's a great point, because there's that famous quotation or the famous saying that says, all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. The concept being that, all mediums are using their psychic senses to connect to the spirit discarnate, whereas people who are psychically involved are just connecting with information to spirit incarnate.
Yeah, that is a thing, true. And I really don't like that little maxim that you've just quoted. It's one of my pet peeves, one of my pet hates, because I think we are all mediums. How can we not be? We are all soul beings. We all have eternal essence. We all speak the language of the soul. Before we came to be a human being, we were a soul being. And when we finished in this body, we're going back to being a soul being. So of course, we're all mediums. It's just whether or not you want to work with that faculty.
Yes, I agree. That's well said. I love the color you've added to it. I guess it was perhaps those who are farther along the mediumship path, or farther along the understanding of their own mediumship. Perhaps that's what should be said.
Yes, that's right.
I love that. So how that you brought up the journey, the beginning, how did you begin to understand your connection to spirit? Describe perhaps some of your early encounters with spirit, your early communications with spirit. I always love to hear how people are discussing their first encounters, like, oh, wait a second, I can actually communicate with spirit. This is great.
Yeah, that's a good point. I used to see spirit all the time. Well, I say all the time. That's not right. I used to see spirit occasionally in my later teens. So from about 15, I would see the edge of somebody going out of my vision. A spirit person, not somebody physically present. And I'd be like, what on earth is that? Or one instance I can really remember is walking down towards my parents' house, and I was walking with a boyfriend at the time. I think it was about 15, harmlessly walking home from town, probably with a quarter of sweets in my pocket. And we were both 15. And I said to him, there's two women at the bus stop. They're there every Saturday. And he said, where? I said, right ahead at the bus stop. Right, we were walking towards the bus stop. One was sitting down, one was standing up. They both had shopping bags. And he couldn't see them, and I couldn't believe he couldn't see them. Even when we walked past them, I said, these women? No, there's nobody there. And after that, I thought, oh, there's something strange going on here. But didn't really think much of it. And, yeah, so things like that happened. But when I was at 30, I had my first child at 31, actually. And it was after that I started to see strongly this spirit presence in my house. And it was the presence of a man, and he had a big black rimmed hat on, big rims, and a bowler piece to the middle, but a big rimmed hat. And he wore a big black cloak and huge black boots. And he was huge. He was about 7 foot tall. He was massive. And he stood in the doorway of my son's room. And I said to my partner at the time, you must be able to see this man. He's standing. I can't go in to see my son because he's in the doorway. I can't get past him. My partner just thought I was bonkers. For goodness sakes, there's nobody there. Don't be ridiculous. And I was sort of start to panic a bit. Like, what is going on? Why can you not see it? And I can see it so strongly. And in the end, mothers love being so strong for one's child. I just sort of dived into the doorway and said to the spirit man, you have to move out of the way. I have to see my son move. And of course he wasn't there, and I was quite well able to walk through the doorway. But after that, one of my friends saw that same man, one of my friends who has nothing to do with mediumship, nothing to do with psychic. I was an actress at the time, and she was an actress herself. She was a friend of mine. She'd come round, and we were sitting at the bottom of the garden in London, nowhere in the countryside, and we had a little bonfire going, and I don't know what we were doing, probably toasting marshmallows or something fun. And my son was asleep in bed. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. And she said, Annie, this man dressed in black has just gone in through your back door. He's wearing a cloak and boots and a big black hat. I said, oh, yeah, don't worry about him. He's always here. But that was the first time somebody else had seen something that I had seen. That was really interesting. Then my children started seeing spirit.
Oh, really?
I didn't say anything to my children because you don't want to scare any child. You don't tell them that there is anything untoward, especially when you don't understand it so much yourself.
Yep.
And it was my daughter. Well, my son had an invisible friend, so he was always around. I could never see the invisible friend, but he spoke about him all the time. And then my daughter started talking about the lady at the top of the stairs. And it was then that when she was just standing talking to this, I couldn't see the lady myself. Yeah, she started talking to these invisible people. It was after that I thought, I need to get some training here because this is all going a bit, this is all kicking off. Lots of stuff was going on. So that's, when I was in my very early 30s, right, I got to get some training for this.
So in the beginning, as all these things were starting to happen, you started realizing that there's something more than just what I'm aware of, and I've got to become trained. I've got to understand how to work with this all, because there's obviously more than meets the eye, literally.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I wanted to support my children and be able to talk with authority to them about that which they were experiencing. And I couldn't at that point. I didn't know how to support them. I never wanted to dismiss them or tell them that they were talking nonsense, because I knew that they weren't.
Yeah.
But I needed to know sort of how to best support them so that they weren't frightened and things like that. So we often used to talk about the people in the house. We just used to welcome them, welcome. Sitting down to the table. Hi, lady. Hi, man. Welcome. Come and eat with us. Things like that. So it was always very matter of fact in our house. It wasn't a big, oh, she's seeing spirit people. It was nothing like that. It was all very, all very part and parcel of what was going on at the time.
What was it like the first time you actually started receiving a communication from spirit? What did it feel like to you?
Well, this is one I can remember, because you don't often remember as a medium your demonstrations or what you said, because the information comes from the spirit world. It flows through your spirit and gets delivered to the spirit of the person sitting in front of you. So from spirit, through spirit, to spirit, you don't retain it.
Nope.
You're like a channel, you channel it through. But one or two you do if they have a big effect on you. And the one I do remember is my very first demonstration ever. And I must have been about 32. And I went to Tony Stockwell's, it's now Soul Space. He, at the time, had a place in Wickford, Tony Stockwell's school. Can't remember what it was called. It wasn't called Soul Space then. But I went there somehow for a training weekend. I don't know how I did it, because somebody must have looked after my children and given me the money to go. I don't know how I did it. Because I never got out and I was completely stuck at home with the children. When Tony said, "Can I have a volunteer who would like to demonstrate?" my hand shot straight up in the sky.
Wow.
I'm like, I'll do it. I'll give it a try. So I stood up in front of the class, and I remember bringing through 2 spirit children. And I said, there are 2 children here, and they died. I probably wasn't as well trained then, was I? They died on a beach. I wouldn't say it that way now, but I think that's possibly what I did say and how I expressed it. And they were, so they drowned on this beach. And I was talking about the boy who had a collection of comics, and he kept them in a glass cabinet in his bedroom. And the cabinet had no legs and stood on the floor, and it was this high, and the comics were up to 3/4 full, and he loved reading. And the lady that I was working with was just like, yeah, this is amazing. I said, but there are 3 children here. So afterwards, she said to me afterwards, that was so accurate. That was my son or my nephew or whoever it was. But there were only 2 children. I said, oh, well, he did express that there were 3 children playing together. She said, no, I think there were only 2. And I said, okay, well, thank you. Then we all had tea break. And then she came back up to me and she said, you know what? It's my mistake. There were 3 children that died that day. There were 3 of them, and they were all friends. I don't know how she missed that, but we get psychic amnesia sometimes. We can't quite remember. And and that really stuck with me, that I was able to give that message to that lady with those children, and it was so important to her. So
That's great.
Really remember that very strongly. It was a beautiful connection.
Did you feel sometimes people express the amazement that the information that comes through is so subtle? Sometimes they're expecting really powerful voices or color or anything that's really much more visceral. Did you find it rather difficult in the beginning? That you begin to realize what this information is coming through is so much more subtle than I realized?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. At the beginning, so that was a really good example of my first demonstration. Then we go and do exercises afterwards, and I can't do anything. And, you're just thinking, where are all the spirit people? And when you're first focusing, and Tony's there, just, blend your mind with that of the spirit world. And I'm thinking, all I can see is darkness. There's nothing here. I don't know what I'm doing. And you might bring through 1 or 2 pieces of information. I think it's a lady. I think she's old. Maybe she had a house with windows and a door. You're not saying that much, but still, it was still being taken in some way, the information. So I was very clairvoyant because I started with, I think maybe because I saw things so clearly with my clairvoyance since a child. And then I went on to study the tarot. So my clairvoyance, which is my clear vision, and the images that I see in my mind is very, very strong. So initially, I was really focusing on that for my mediumship and trying to see things. And at the beginning, Chris, my mediumship worked this way. I would feel as if there was somebody standing right behind me. You know, if you're in a shop and you're queuing up for your groceries and there is actually somebody behind you and you can feel them, but you don't have to turn around. You just know they're there. It was that kind of feeling. And that's how I knew that spirit were with me. And then I would begin to see them in my mind and I would get this really clear image of them. And then I was able to give the information of that which I was seeing. So that's kind of how it started to work. But now it doesn't work like that at all. It is so subtle now that it's barely there. And it's only by the very nature of beginning to speak that you bring spirit with you. It's so difficult to describe. Let me try to make that a little clearer. When I first begin my mediumship links now, I might just see, well, let me try and give you an example of something I did a demonstration last week. Oh yeah. So all I'm aware of is a vest top. You know, like a vest, that's all I can see from the spirit world. And so I say, as my mind is now linking with the spirit world, and I still can only see a vest top, I have no further information. I know that as I bring spirit closer and I can still see this vest top, and then suddenly I'm aware it's a lady I'm with, a female. And I know that I'm being joined by a female here. And then I'm aware, so subtly, she's young. And I said, I feel this lady's about 16. This is a young girl. And then I said 13. And then, no, I'm just being corrected here. It's 16. And then nothing else is happening. And you're waiting and you're breathing and you're just thinking, what else is coming? Then it starts to flow in. She had leukemia, this girl. She passes away from this illness. I know she connects to the lady over here at the back on the left. And I know that she has a connection to your brother because she speaks of your brother. Yes, that was my brother's girlfriend. She died at 16 of leukemia. And that's how it begins. But that beginning initial waiting for spirit world to begin to work with you is the tiniest little thing they might give you. You might just hear a word or a phrase, or you might just become aware of a slight change in the atmosphere, and you know they're coming close, but you don't quite know what they're going to say or what they're going to present to you until it arrives out of your mouth. And now my mediumship still, believe you me, needs a lot of refining. That's why I continue to train. I'm really trying to focus on my clairsentience, which is my clear feeling. So we're going into my gut feeling, your gut feeling. What do you feel? What do you instinctively feel? What is the significance of that which they're giving you? So I'm trying to work a lot more with that.
That's so perfect. I think what happens to a lot of people is they either expect something solid, material, loud, firm, and when they don't get that, they start to panic. And as they start to panic, they go into their left brain. Yeah. And their left brain starts to take over, which is the opposite of what we want to happen. We want our right brain to allow the creative connection. And once that left brain takes over, it starts to, I think, what would you say, muffle that subtle understanding and connection from the right brain, because our left ego mind is saying, "Oh, I'm not good. I'm not connecting." It just starts to go haywire.
Yeah, if you let your conscious mind ascend and rise and take over the session, then it's game over, really.
Right.
Because interferes. Your conscious mind isn't psychic or mediumistic, so it's just getting in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, we want to be correct. We don't want to stand there like a lemon, not saying anything. We want to get true, clear perceptions, but you have to surrender to the spirit world. They talk about this so often at the Arthur Finney College. You must surrender. What is it they're trying to say? Stop getting in the way of them by trying to make sense of what they're saying. Just deliver what they're saying. And sometimes I find myself saying in a demonstration of mediumship or a mediumship link, I said something recently to somebody. There's two things I said. One, the spirit, I was working with a grandfather saying spirit world. He says that the granddaughter's hair has gone up. like this. It's gone up from the shoulders up to the chin. Do you understand? The hair's gone up. Oh, yeah, she had a haircut. So it wasn't that it had gone up. It was that the hair was cut. And I don't know what I'm saying because I'm not consciously making sense of it with my conscious mind. So, of course, if I was, I'd say, oh, she's recently had a haircut, hasn't she? You're working with spirits, so they're trying to show you and describe and help you feel. I can feel my hair getting shorter and shorter and smaller. It's going up in the sky. And another way that Spirit World worked with me recently was they said, the girl, so say again, I'm working with a grandfather in Spirit World, just as an example. He says that his granddaughter can move along the road without using her feet. She moves without using her feet. Do you understand what he's saying? And they said, yes, she's recently bought a skateboard. And it's funny, isn't it? So my conscious mind is not involved in that process because I just have to say how the spirit world are expressing it to me.
Right.
So yeah.
You've got to give it exactly as you get it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's kind of the other thing is, as the medium, allow spirit, you're the instrument, allow spirit to play you as the instrument and just go with it. Yeah. Anytime you try to interpret exactly what they're giving you, that's your left mind, your conscious mind coming in, and the accuracy of the information or any information just gets lost.
Yes, we colour it then. We colour it with our own references. We colour it with our own information, and that's not what the spirit world have told us at all.
Not at all. And I love your description of the unfoldment of your mediumship, where you started out being very clairvoyant and then you became more clairsentient. I find that to be perhaps a very common path, because I think most people are very visual people, and that's how spirit's going to work with you no matter what you have. They're going to work with your raw material. So if you're a visual person, they're going to start with your clairvoyance, and eventually you'll start to get your feeling, your clairsentience. And I find that the clairsentience is perhaps the most powerful information, because you're literally connecting and blending, and that's when your blend gets really strong.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
Interesting. So what would you say perhaps might be, I know we've often forget our readings, but is there any particular reading that has stood out for you, whether it's been incredibly meaningful or incredibly healing for somebody? Anything that really wowed you?
Yeah, there was one that I did. Again, it was at Tony Stockwell's Soul Space in Billericay this time, and I was doing a demonstration in mediumship. Again, it was quite early on in my demonstrating career, and I was working with a child in the spirit world who had passed away, and I said she's in Great Ormond Street Hospital, this girl. And she gives me the name Clarence. And there's a lady on the front row put her hand up. She said, I don't know the girl, but this girl is in Clarence Ward at Great Ormond Street. She's in the next bed to my granddaughter. So I don't know the girl, but I know she passed away. I know her mother, but I didn't know her so well. And I said, okay, that's great. So that was really interesting that I brought through Clarence Ward, Great Ormond Street, and that she happened to be in the next. And I think I gave the name of her daughter, whatever the name was. And then I said a little bit about how her mother and her used to travel up and down on the train. I gave a bit of information about that, I remember. But I think the point I'm coming to is at the end, I said, this young girl is giving a bracelet, wants to give a bracelet to her mum. I don't know, it's made of beads, it's around the wrist, and she wants to give it to her mum. And the woman that was in the demonstration in the front seat said, I don't know anything about that, but I will tell her mother everything that you've told me. And then they phoned, that lady was kind enough to phone Tony. It was, I was working with Natalie Walker or Limpro, but possibly Natalie Walker. She was the other teacher on the course. And they phoned Tony and they said, just to let Anne know, the medium that was working last night, that girl in the spirit world, the last thing that she'd ever given her mother before she died was this little beaded bracelet that she'd made in Clarence Ward at Great Ormond Street Hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Now that, I will never need any other proof ever again in my entire life that the spirit world exists and that was a true spirit communication.
Yeah, that's so perfect that sometimes we need that wow ourselves to erase the constant skeptic in our mind. It's our ego mind. It's like, oh, it's not real. It's, we're so grounded in, the material world that we need that shocking reading, shocking proof of survival for us to say this is real. We can really do this.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and not all mediumship links are like that. You're not always able to give this wonderful wow factor, this X factor, this amazing reading. Sometimes it's just enough for your client to feel the presence of their loved one in the space when you're just connecting, and just through the words that are spoken. Doesn't necessarily have to be massively evidential as that was to still have a great impact on somebody.
Sure.
So I think with our mediumship, we do have these wonderful moments, but it's rare. Doesn't always happen that way.
Right. But those wonderful moments are for the individual medium enough to say, this is real. I now can do this. This is fantastic. Spirit's with me, and they're trying to help me along. Which I think it's those little pieces that we as mediums are trying to say, okay, good. I feel a little more comfortable. I'm not struggling quite as much. This is good. Another question in that area: do you find, or perhaps in your journey, in your development, did you find that your mediumship was sort of a progression of 2 steps forward, 1 step back? 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and and what did you do to keep on moving forward when you were in that valley?
That's a brilliant question, because mediumship is so like that as you're training. It is 2 steps forward and 20 steps back in my experience. And I was often in a valley and didn't know what I was doing. And quite frankly, so many times I just wanted to stop. I wanted to get off and just say, I'm not doing it ever again. I'm never doing it again. Obviously don't know what I'm doing. You bring through people from the spirit world that seem very real to you, but your recipient can't take. You know they're there, but you can't get the evidence correct, and it makes you feel you're useless and there's no point in doing it anymore, and I can't do this, and it's all rubbish anyway. You get to that point, not doing it. And then something will happen. The spirit world won't let you go that easy. Nope. Something will happen and you'll give a piece of information that will blow you away. So you just keep going. But also I think what I've learned, Chris, is that human life has to unfold for you at the same time as your mediumship. So you can't always be studying and going off and doing this course and that course. It's really important that we live as human beings and that we experience life. People, having a great time with your friends, for instance, or having the most devastating time if somebody's just passed away who you loved, or, somebody's ill, you got to go and look after them, or you got to go and do this, you got to go and get the shopping in, all the normal stuff that takes you away from what you'd prefer to be doing, which is reading books and working on your mediumship. But what that does, that human life, unfolds your mediumship. It helps you be a better medium because you understand things so much better. You increase your frame of reference for when you are working with the spirit world. So the two go hand in hand.
They do. It's a great point. What I've found is that oftentimes spirit loves working with people who have had more life experience because they've got more, to your point, references. It's almost like they can now go into a filing cabinet that's got more stuff. They have more references. They can say, oh, now I can pull out this reference from that filing cabinet, put it in the play, and all of a sudden the medium goes, oh, I understand this experience X, Y, Z. Oh, now I know what to talk about. And there's more things to talk about. And it broadens the scope of the individual. There's more to talk about, more to understand, more to feel.
That's right, it does.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And there are so many times where you'll be going along wonderful and all these wonderful readings, all these wonderful experiences that you're having with a client, and all of a sudden there's one reading where it just falls apart and everything goes to pot, and everything is just, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was the worst thing I suck.
Yeah.
And then, to your point, Spirit says, no, we're not going to let you go. And then the very next reading is brilliant. You're like, what just happened?
Yeah, it is. It does happen, but it happens to everybody. It happens to the best of the mediums out there, not all the time, but it is a thing that happens on a not an unregular basis. It does happen.
Right.
And every reading has to be an experiment with the spirit world. You never know how it's going to go.
Right. Yeah. There is no perfect reading. I mean, there can be sometimes, but it's always, I would say mediumship is constantly unfolding. I think it was Mavis Patilla who, I forget, she had a great quotation. It's like, we're constantly learning. We never finish learning. We're always putting in new arrows into our quiver.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that when people are just beginning their journey with learning to connect with spirit or learning to raise their own spirituality, what are some of the things that you would suggest people begin to do as they either are learning to unfold, learning to raise their vibration, learning to connect with spirit? What are some of the things you'd point them to?
In terms of how they might train themselves, you mean, Chris?
Yeah, train themselves, or perhaps understand spirit better, some of the early building blocks, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's understanding the mechanics of it and how it actually works. And I like to explain it as if you're listening to an old-fashioned radio. So there's radio stations being broadcast all the time, but we can't hear them. We're not attuned to them. We haven't turned our receiver on. But when we do, we can receive that which is being broadcast through the medium of radio, right? And then with the spirit world, it's very similar. We have to attune. If you dial an old-fashioned radio and you go slightly too far past where the radio station bite is, you don't quite catch it. You catch a little bit and then you've gone too far. You dial it back. Oh, you've gone too far the other way. And you're trying to get this beautiful attunement where you can really hear very clearly. And if you look at it like that's your energy is one side and the spirit world is the other side. Those two energies have to attune to each other and reach the same frequency or the same vibration so that they can connect and information can flow. And you have to retain it and sustain it, because and that is called the power. So your power you have to sit in the power, work in the power, sustain that power with the spirit world. And if you fall out of it, if your conscious mind comes up, your power will drop. If you think about something else, your power will drop. If you start focusing on the client because they look a bit miserable or shocked or bored, your power will drop. If you let go of the spirit communicator and sort of don't follow up what they're saying or find the significance of what they're saying, the power will drop. And this is why we get stop-start mediumship, stop-start like a car kangarooing up the road. You get a little bit, then you don't. So, yeah, on a cold morning. So the training that you do will enable you to sustain that link with the spirit world. And it takes training to be able to do that. You know this, Chris, because you've trained yourself for many, many years. It takes energy to sustain that. It takes focus, and it takes focus in a way that is very different to focus with your conscious mind. You have to move your conscious mind completely out of the way so that you work in this slightly altered state and sustain that state.
Right.
So how do you do that? 2 ways as a beginner. Number 1, meditation is very good for stilling the conscious mind. Meditation, you can focus on the breath, you can focus on a candle. It's just a case of stilling those thoughts that come in about having to pay the gas bill, or what am I going to do tomorrow, what am I having for supper, and so has just upset me. All of those thoughts. So just disciplining your conscious mind into stillness and surrender. That's number one. And then the second part is sitting in the power, which is completely different to meditating. It is not meditation. It's sitting in the stillness and the divinity of your own soul and the divinity and the stillness of God. And I have struggled with this, Chris. I haven't struggled to sit in the power, but I've struggled with the God concept because I was brought up as a Catholic and I was force-fed God in all his different ways. And I rebelled against that eventually. I don't want to know about God. I don't even want to hear the name God. I shall use universal force to describe. And I've come full circle on this now, at the age that I am. And I am realizing the only way for me to deepen my mediumship is to deepen that connection to the divine. The divine lives within me. I am God. You are God. We are all part of this divine essence. And sitting in that stillness and connecting to all that is, all that love and all that compassion and all that beauty. Not trying to reach for it, not trying to feel it, not trying to sit in the power. I must sit in the power. It's doing that as little as possible and just enjoying your soul and expanding. That will grow your mediumship quicker than anything else, but you have to dedicate time to it.
Right, exactly. I think those are perhaps the two biggest building blocks you touched on. First, learning to sit in the stillness, to still the conscious mind, just focusing on the breathing, focusing on a candle, focusing on perhaps some people might be a mantra, just getting your mind focused on that one thing so that it's nice and calm and quiet. I think it was Gordon Higginson back in the day who used to be forced to sit in a closet. Today that'd be child abuse. Yes. But he certainly learned how to sit in the stillness because he wasn't allowed out for, I don't know, like an hour or something. But he got used to it. So that's the whole idea, is learning to sit in the silence. Now, I'm not suggesting people should sit in a closet by themselves, but if that works, okay. But yes, definitely learn to still the conscious mind. And to your point, then learn to sit in the power where you're allowing your vibrations to rise. You're allowing your love and your essence to rise. If that's part of a visualization, because the sitting in the power meditation actually is ultimately a wonderful visualization that you will see yourself rising and feel yourself. And there are a number of different, meditation tracks that do just that. And you feel it. And that's where, and to your point, I was exactly like you. I mean, I was brought up in an agnostic household where, we're all materialists and it was like, there's, the big man in the sky, ha, 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 ha. So, and then of course I go off into finance. I'm like Mr. Numbers, Mr. Analytical, Mr. This and that. And like all of a sudden I had this experience. I'm like, what? What's going on here? This is far beyond whatever and so that's when all of a sudden it's like somebody opened the door and said, okay, we're going to let you see other things. I was like, all right. So then to your point, now it's like, but whereas before I thought, God was more like a religious concept, now it's more of an energetic, connection.
Yeah.
And a feeling of love. And so, I love the way you phrase those two building blocks. It's great. I think those are perhaps the two areas people should really begin to work with. That's how they can learn to connect themselves.
And I think also, Chris, it's important to know you can't become a medium overnight.
No.
You can have experiences and you can give a mediumship connection. Of course you can. You could do it in a trice if you wanted. But really to sustain that and give good readings consistently, that takes dedication. That takes time. It takes time, as I've said, for life to unfold. And it takes time for you to get to know how it feels. It just takes time. So those people who think, I'll do a quick weekend at the Arthur Finney College or a 1 week at the Arthur Finney College and then I'll be a medium. No, you won't be. You are a medium. Everyone is, but you won't. You have to understand that it's a lifestyle. It's a path. It's a dedication. And you have to have a certain passion for it. So you can't think that you're going to do it overnight.
No. And I think that was perhaps the biggest frustration I had when I started was I was thinking, okay, I just want to be 6 months down the road and I just want to then be perfect. I'm going to be perfect. So I'm going to go gangbusters for 6 months and Yahoo, I'm all there. And then I remember my mentor saying, it'll take about 5 to 7 years. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I was so disheartened. Like, no, don't tell me this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. But 5 or 7 beautiful years with beautiful experiences, meeting wonderful people. And the best thing of all is you get to know yourself so well through it.
Yeah. And you also get to experience I would say, a broader range of feelings, emotions, and sensitivities. I think one of the things that really happened to me was it really opened up my sensitivity. Some may describe it as it added the female energy to the male energy, which, I'd closed off. And so it made me that much more sensitive because all mediums are sensitive. They have to be. We have to be sensitive to the energy that's out there. So we're literally receiving. And I think the feminine is the much more of the receptive energy, whereas guys are just, we're out going, all this rah, rah, rah. So it was a much more, that was a development just of the self.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
So it's quite different. What are some of the things that you would say if you were to talk to a listener today and say, this is perhaps the biggest recommendation I can give to you about expanding your sensitivity, your connection to spirit, even if the person's not a medium, maybe it's a person who wants to connect to their own loved one. What would you say would be perhaps the biggest single thing they might be able to do?
Are you asking me to give a short exercise or something like that, Chris? Is that
either an exercise or just perhaps a recommendation of what a person might be able to do to improve their own connection to their own loved ones, even if they're not a medium?
Yeah, I think that's great. And my advice would be to not constantly, you've got a life to live, but to really bring them to mind. Remember all those times that you've had together, the memories that you hold with them. Begin it with your imagination first. Just imagine that person. Imagine that day that you went to Germany with them and they drove their Ford Capri and you sat there and you enjoyed that beautiful connection. And you went and you had a pint with them and their friend, and just remember all of those things and then start to converse with them in your mind. Talk to them about how you miss them, what the things they're missing that you think they're missing. They won't be missing it, I assure you, but the things they think they've missed, birthdays, anniversaries, etc. And start to bring them back into a relationship with you, because I think we stop talking to our loved ones. They're dead, they're gone, that's it. We don't have them anymore. But I think we need to keep a dialogue with them and say, I'm open to any signs you want to bring me. Bring me something that I might know that you are here. Bring me something, show me something. And you will find that things begin to happen. You might suddenly catch their name somewhere, or you might suddenly see something symbolic for you. That symbol might be a feather, a bird, a something, a butterfly. It may not be. Symbolic for you might be a bar of chocolate with a rose on the front of it. I don't know, whatever your symbol is. But just notice these things and notice how the spirit world converse, because they talk to us in a very different way. You're not necessarily going to hear them speaking in your mind. You might smell their fragrance. You might hear them talk in your mind. You might hear them, you might sense them in a space, but they also can manipulate events and things that happen around us that we might know that their presence is still with us. So I think that begins with a conversation. I'm open to that. I'm open to that. But what I do if I'm really missing someone, I will close my eyes and I have created this most beautiful bench seat in a sanctuary in my mind. And I will sit on that bench seat. There's a spare chair there for the person that I want. And I will ask them to come and sit next to me. And I will watch them as they walk towards me in my mind, and they sit right next to me. And we have the most beautiful conversations back and forth and back and forth. That's how I connect to my loved ones in spirit world.
Wow, that's great. That's a wonderful way to not only acknowledge that they're still there, but to know that they are still very much alive and want to connect with you. And that's a perfect way to connect with them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
You know, sometimes it's not that easy. I've got a brother now in the spirit world who's been there 3 years. My beautiful brother, Paul, he died at 57 from a brain tumor. Bless him. Has he been back to see me? No. I haven't sensed him. I haven't seen him. I haven't felt him. I talk to him all the time. I have picked up feathers, many, many white feathers from there was a place when he was alive. I used to send him voice messages, Chris, on WhatsApp. And every time I seem to be recording a message to him, I seem to be standing at this particular tree. So I called that tree Paul's Corner. And so now he's gone to the spirit world. And I often walk past Paul's Corner. And so many times, I can't tell you the amount of times I've walked past and there has been a white feather at that tree. And I pick them up and I keep them. And I believe that is my brother speaking to me, very much so. Especially if I say, leave a feather for me, and he will.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. Well, Ann, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I loved all the information that you were sharing with us. This is so expansive and insightful. So thank you for joining us.
Chris, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed just being able to share a little bit of that which I've learned. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. It was great. So thank you so much. And my dear listeners, thank you so much for joining us today for another episode on Spirits Beside Us. And definitely stay tuned for the next episode coming up this coming Wednesday, when we're going to continue to talk about spirit, healing, joy, expansion, and all the topics that we've been following thus far. If you like the information you're hearing, by all means, certainly like and continue to subscribe to the channel. And if you have any ideas that you'd like to hear, by all means, certainly write in. You can reach us here. The website with all the information is spiritbesideus.com, so you can get all the information on the show notes there. So until then, I will see you for next Wednesday. And till then, this is Chris sending you love and light. And bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.